At Kindred, we hold ourselves to the highest standards. Our company's mission is built upon the foundational principle of acting with integrity. All of us must ensure that at all times, we conduct ourselves and our business in a manner that complies with the rules and regulations that govern our operations. Doing so can sometimes be confusing or overwhelming, as healthcare rules and regulations are very complex. Not only is there a lot of information to learn, but sometimes it's hard to understand how specific requirements apply to you, your job, and the everyday decisions you make. Kindred's compliance program is designed to help provide guidance and answers to your questions. We start by helping you understand our compliance program and code of conduct through a series of training modules. Kindred requires all employees to complete compliance training annually, because knowing how to do things the right way is important. By the end of this video, you should be familiar with the structure and functions of Kindred's compliance program, and understand why it is important for you to comply with policies and procedures. So what is compliance? To put it simply, compliance is acting with integrity and doing the right thing. Kindred's compliance program is based on the federal sentencing guidelines. These guidelines represent how the government believes a compliance program must operate in order to prevent unlawful or unethical conduct. Kindred's compliance program has several key components. The company has designated a chief compliance officer who oversees our compliance with statutes, rules, regulations, and policies. In addition, we have an executive compliance committee, which serves as an extension of the chief compliance officer and ensures that Kindred is aware of and appropriately addresses compliance issues that arise across the enterprise. Kindred also has compliance policies and procedures in place to prevent fraud, waste, and abuse, and to enhance our operations and the quality of care our company delivers to patients. Compliance training provides information on what is and is not permissible in our day-to-day operations. It also educates you about identifying potential compliance concerns and how and when to report those concerns. Just as importantly, the training explains why it is important that you report any compliance concerns you may encounter. Kindred provides care to patients who are covered under federal healthcare programs, such as Medicare and Medicaid. Since Kindred accepts payments from Medicare and Medicaid, we must follow specific rules regarding how patients are cared for, how services are billed, and how records are kept. The government reimburses healthcare providers for many of the services they provide. In doing so, the government places trust in the healthcare industry to deliver to patients only those services that are medically necessary and to bill those services accurately. You must only submit claims for payment when medically necessary services have been provided and appropriately documented. The government has enacted laws to prevent fraud and abuse. Later videos in this series will explain these laws and discuss how to comply with them. You might be wondering why it's important to follow Kindred's compliance program. As we discussed earlier, the program is designed to ensure our services are performed in a manner that abides by all laws and regulations. The compliance program is also set up to hold employees accountable if they don't act appropriately. Failure to follow Kindred policy carries significant consequences, such as disciplinary actions up to and including termination of employment. Additionally, failure to follow policy may lead to violations of state or federal law. Many of these laws carry penalties for violators, such as fines, licensure actions, jail time, and/or exclusion from participating in federal healthcare programs. Exclusion means the government will not pay you or your employer for any items or services you furnish, order, or prescribe. The compliance program and the compliance department are here to help you provide quality care to patients and to help you reach your business goals in a compliant manner. But it's important to remember that compliance is everyone's job. Kindred has a compliance hotline where you can report your concerns about potential violations of Kindred policies and procedures, or concerns of illegal activity. If you report any such activity, you can remain anonymous if you wish. Kindred protects you against any type of retaliation for reporting compliance concerns in good faith. If you have any questions or concerns as to whether a practice is appropriate, you can reach the department directly at compliance@kindred.com. Remember, you play a vital role in Kindred's compliance program. The program can only be effective and successful when each and every employee acts with integrity and does the right thing. Thank you for your cooperation and support of these important efforts. Have you ever been in a situation where you are doing something that seems to be in conflict with doing the right thing? Where a practical choice feels like it might not be the most ethical one? In a dynamic business environment, it's normal for us to face such situations, but it can cause a lot of anxiety when we are uncertain about what we should do. Imagine everything you need to complete during your shift. Wouldn't it be easier if you completed your documentation at the beginning of your shift, thinking the documentation will be accurate? You have a lot to get done this shift with your patients. It's not going to hurt anyone if you document early when you know the service will be performed. Do you do the right thing and chart only after providing the service? Or do you save yourself time and document early? It may not seem like a big deal. The good news is that by the end of this brief video, you'll have the tools to confidently make the best choice in such situations. You'll be prepared to make the right choices for both yourself and for the company, avoid potential disciplinary action, and feel a whole lot better in the process. An important first step to making sound ethical decisions in the workplace is to become familiar with our company's code of conduct. The code conveys our responsibility for compliance with a number of laws and policies, but it goes well beyond that by placing those obligations within the context of our values and commitment to conducting business with integrity. Our code is a navigation tool, specifically designed to guide our daily decisions in the right direction. Once we understand the purpose of the code, it is important that we read it in full and understand how it pertains to our own job functions. Some topics covered in the code include disclosing conflicts of interest, avoiding kickback issues, preventing harassment and discrimination in the workplace, and even maintaining accurate and timely records. The decisions that each of us make in such situations determine how we make good on our commitments to one another, our patients and partners, the communities where we work and live, and to the environments in which we operate. These decisions also help define us as fair and ethical professionals and earn us the trust so critical to our continued success in the marketplace. By now, you should have the information you need to understand the purpose of our code of conduct. The last step is recognizing that the code may not have answers for every ethical dilemma we face. However, the code will always direct us to resources to help us make the right decisions and answer any questions we have. The code outlines paths for reporting any misconduct you believe you have witnessed. These paths include contacting your direct supervisor, our compliance department, HR, our general counsel, or our compliance hotline or helpline. In summary, the best way to make the right ethical choices for yourself and the company is to familiarize yourself with the objectives and purpose of our code. Understand the topics and situations outlined in the code, and recognize the channels available to all of us for asking questions and reporting concerns. So, what about that situation where you wanted to document early? It's probably clear that documenting a service you haven't provided would undermine your own integrity, put the patient's health at risk, and put the clinical record at risk for inaccuracies. Though the Code of Conduct may not outline this particular situation, it does remind us that we must always be truthful in our business dealings. In the short run, it may take you a little extra time to finish your charting. In the long run, you will maintain your integrity and help show just how committed we are as a company to our values. Now, doesn't that make you feel better already? If you have any questions about our Code of Conduct or other compliance issues, please contact our Ethics or Compliance Office. We're here to help. Have you ever been in a situation where you thought a coworker treated a patient differently because of his or her race, gender, or other personal characteristic? But you didn't want to say anything, fearing you would jeopardize your relationship with the coworker, or even your job. It can be very stressful as we struggle with making the best decision. Imagine you notice one of your colleagues consistently giving what seems like preferential treatment to patients of a particular race or ethnicity, regardless of their health conditions. Do you choose to ignore this behavior and avoid a conflict, knowing that some patients will be underserved? Or do you confront your colleague or even report the incident, but risk being seen as a troublemaker? The good news is that by the end of this brief video, you'll have the tools to confidently make the best choice in these situations. You'll make the right choices for both yourself and for the company, avoid potential disciplinary action, and feel a whole lot better in the process. The first step to avoiding discrimination in healthcare is being able to define it. Discrimination occurs when any patient is denied equal access to quality healthcare, specifically due to personal characteristics such as race, color, national origin, sexual orientation, sexual identity, age, religion, or disability. Such discrimination is in conflict with our organization's values and is also against the law. Next, you must be able to recognize situations in which discrimination occurs. Some examples of discrimination in healthcare include the following scenarios, which are all drawn from actual cases investigated by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services Office for Civil Rights. A nurse ignores a patient of color who needs urgent medical attention for close to an hour and attends to a white patient without a health emergency, who waits fewer than 5 minutes for care. An emergency department physician denies a mother with limited English proficiency an interpreter when she requests one. Instead, the physician uses the mother's 13-year-old son as the interpreter while he is being treated. Staff members at a hospital create a hostile environment for a transgender woman and require her to share a room with a male patient. A hospital fails to provide patients who are deaf or hard of hearing with adequate access to sign language interpreters. Emergency department employees ridicule a male patient who sustained injuries in a domestic incident and failed to evaluate the patient under a domestic violence protocol because he is male. If we become aware of such behaviors, we must immediately act to correct the situation. This may mean confronting a coworker to stop the discrimination if you are able. But whenever you suspect that a patient or his or her companion has been discriminated against based on their personal characteristics, you must report the incident to a manager or to the compliance office immediately. In such situations, you should also be prepared to step up and contact the appropriate individuals who can help facilitate equal access while the patient is still receiving care. Remember, we all have a responsibility to be patient advocates. This means that, among other things, we must always do the following. Ensure that all patients have equal access to extraordinary and compassionate healthcare, regardless of personal characteristics like race, color, national origin, sexual orientation, sexual identity, age, religion, or disability. Ensure that patients and their companions requiring it have access to a qualified, competent interpreter for either spoken language or sign language. And never rely on unqualified staff interpreters, minors, or others where there could be a competency concern, except in a life-threatening emergency. Ensure that we provide care in a manner consistent with our policies defining qualified services for the deaf, blind, and otherwise disabled patients and their companions. Ensure that patients are provided with an opportunity to identify their preferred name and gender. Be mindful of room placement to ensure the safe, ethical, appropriate, and non-discriminatory assignment of rooms for patients who are transgender. Ensure that we follow a gender-neutral procedure for reporting incidents involving domestic abuse. In summary, eliminating discrimination requires that we be able to define it. We must recognize when it is happening, and we must act to stop it, which includes reporting the incident immediately to a manager or to the compliance office. Going back to the situation involving your colleague consistently giving preferential treatment to certain groups of patients, it's now probably pretty clear that you must act by notifying a manager or contacting the compliance office. In the short run, it may feel like you're jeopardizing your relationship with a coworker, but in the long run, you'll ensure that patients not only experience a discrimination-free and respectful environment, but also receive the care they deserve. Now, doesn't that make you feel better already? If you have any questions about discrimination in healthcare, please contact our compliance office. We're here to help. As you may be aware, two of Kindred Healthcare's affiliates, Rehab Care and Gentiva, have entered into corporate integrity agreements with the Office of Inspector General, or OIG. By the end of this training, you should know what a corporate integrity agreement, or CIA, is, and how it affects you. A corporate integrity agreement is a tool the government uses to improve the quality of healthcare and to promote compliance with healthcare regulations. One of the primary goals of a CIA is to make sure a healthcare company has an adequate compliance program in place. You've learned in previous training sessions that Kindred has had a compliance program for many years, but the company is taking this opportunity to ensure our program is efficient and that we operate in accordance with all applicable laws and regulations. Compliance with Medicare regulations and federal and state laws and regulations is critical to all of us, and we should all strive to adhere to the highest standards of ethical, compliant behavior for the benefit of our company and our patients. While the Rehab Care and Gentiva CIAs are focused on contract rehabilitation therapy services and hospice services respectively, the changes Kindred is making to its practices will improve all of the company's operations. Over the next several months, you will see changes to our code of conduct, training, and policies and procedures. That said, many parts of the compliance program will not change. For example, we will continue to have a compliance hotline you can call to report your concerns. You will learn more about the hotline and your duty to report any illegal or unethical behavior during a separate training session. If you've completed annual compliance training in the past, you likely have noticed the changes we've made to the training this year. In addition, all employees who provide therapy in skilled nursing facilities and hospice services will be required to complete specific training on providing medically necessary services. The therapy training covers several topics to help those employees learn how to meet all regulatory requirements when providing services, including the obligation to only provide medically necessary services and make sure they are accurately documented. Kindred has hired an independent review organization to perform annual reviews of rehabilitation therapy services provided under contracts between rehab care and third-party owned and operated skilled nursing facilities. Therapy records will be reviewed to determine if the services provided were medically necessary and appropriate under the applicable regulations, manuals, and guidance, including rules and regulations governing the provision of skilled rehabilitation therapy and the established practice guidelines and generally accepted standards of medical practice. Kindred also performs annual reviews of hospice services, designed to verify that patients admitted to hospice are eligible for the hospice benefit. Compliance department employees perform these reviews, and an independent review organization determines if the reviews are accurate. In addition, Kindred is required to submit a report to the OIG outlining the company's compliance activities for the year, including audit results and confirming employees completed required training. We previously let you know which of our compliance and clinical policies and procedures were revised to ensure your roles and responsibilities are clear. You can find the compliance policies on kindred.com and the compliance department page on Connect. Clinical policies and procedures were distributed to you directly, but also are available on Connect. Even if you've already read the policies, please take time to review them again and make sure you are following each policy. If you have any questions about the policies, ask your supervisor or contact the compliance department. And if we revise or add any new compliance or clinical policies, we pledge to provide you with a description of the revisions within 30 days of the change. Each corporate integrity agreement lasts 5 years from the date it was signed. Kindred is committed to improving its compliance program, operations, and systems during that time period and beyond. There are many responsibilities for our company during the period covered by the CIAs, but we view this as an opportunity to improve our care and become an even better provider of healthcare services. You should take this opportunity to make sure you are conducting your actions in a way that is ethical and meets all regulatory guidelines. Compliance is everyone's job, and your continued hard work will help us demonstrate our dedication to our patients and our focus on always doing the right thing. Have you ever been in a situation when you thought someone was acting unethically? Perhaps you weren't sure if it was a big deal or not, and you didn't want to speak up and risk being known as a troublemaker. In these situations, it may be stressful figuring out how to make the best decision. Imagine you overhear a coworker saying he sometimes adds a few minutes to resident therapy times to make sure he meets his goals. It's easy to feel like it isn't a big deal, After all, it's only a few minutes here and there. You know it's wrong, but you don't want to make trouble for your coworker. The good news is that by the end of this brief video, you'll have the tools you need to confidently make the best choice in situations similar to this. You'll be able to make the right decision for both yourself and the company, avoid potential disciplinary action, and feel much better about the overall process. You've already learned that Kindred has a compliance program, including policies, procedures, and a code of conduct. You are responsible for knowing and following compliance guidelines as part of your annual review. It's also important for you to know how not following Kindred policy can negatively affect you, your patients, and Kindred. You know from reading the Code of Conduct and completing training that Kindred policy requires disciplinary action for any employee who takes part in improper conduct or fails to take reasonable steps to prevent or detect such matters. One reasonable step to prevent improper conduct is to report instances of wrongdoing. Failure to report any such instances doesn't just have the potential to impact you and your annual evaluation. Not reporting actions you know are illegal or unethical may also result in harm to your patients. Additionally, your failure to do the right thing could lead to disciplinary action, including verbal warnings, suspension, or termination of employment. We must always act with integrity. When we don't, there are consequences, such as placing patients, coworkers, and yourself at risk. Violating Kindred policy may also be a violation of state or federal law. In addition to the disciplinary actions set forth by Kindred, your actions may also result in fines, jail time, and exclusion from Medicare and Medicaid. Always remember to follow all Kindred policies, procedures, and the Code of Conduct. Ask if you are unsure if a practice is okay. If you're not sure, speak up. Report any instances of wrongdoing, big or small, through Kindred's confidential disclosure program. Think back to the situation earlier where you weren't sure if you should report your coworkers' actions. It's now probably pretty clear that you have to follow through with procedure and report this instance to the compliance department. Billing for services not provided is clearly wrong. The patient is not getting all of their therapy. The bill being submitted is not accurate, and your coworker is acting unethically. Not reporting is not an option. Not only is your coworker subject to disciplinary action for inaccurately reporting therapy times, you are also subject to disciplinary action for failing to report conduct you know is wrong. In the short run, it may feel like it isn't a big deal, or that you don't want to get somebody in trouble. However, in the long run, you'll provide better care to your patients and keep yourself in line with company policy. More importantly, your reputation for doing the right thing will remain intact with your colleagues. Now, doesn't that make you feel better already? Have you ever witnessed something illegal or unethical at work, but felt like reporting it was not the right thing to do? Maybe you thought speaking up seemed more risky than keeping your mouth shut. When situations like this come up, they can create a lot of anxiety as we strive to make the best decision. Suppose a coworker is routinely giving lavish gifts to a customer in exchange for business. You know that the weekend trips, tickets to sporting events, and high-end electronics probably violate our policies on gift giving, and may even violate anti-bribery or anti-kickback laws. But you're afraid if you report the situation, you'll be blamed for hurting business. Do you blow the whistle on your coworker and put your relationship at risk? Or do you keep your mouth shut, knowing these practices will eventually be discovered by someone else and lead to serious consequences for our entire organization? It can feel like either solution is going to cause you a lot of stress. The good news is that by the end of this brief video, you'll have the tools to confidently make the best choice. You'll make the right decision for both yourself and the company, avoid potential disciplinary action, and feel a whole lot better in the process. The first step to resolving this sort of dilemma is being able to identify the kinds of issues that must be reported. Our Code of Conduct offers the clearest guidance to the kinds of ethical and legal conduct we are each responsible for in our day-to-day work. Examples of ethical and legal misconduct include conflicts of interest, like an employee giving contracts to family members, as well as bribery and gifts, the giving of anything of value in exchange for getting or keeping business, like in the scenario we just discussed. Other examples include fraud, deceiving others in business, and issues like harassment, discrimination, insider trading, and more. We must also understand the avenues available for reporting misconduct, as well as the protections afforded by both our company policies and the law for those who report. You must contact the compliance department when you suspect misconduct. Also, our hotline is available for reporting at any time, and depending on your location and the issue at hand, you may be able to make this report anonymously. When reporting misconduct, our policy and the law protect you from any form of retaliation. Retaliation can include obvious things like you're being fired or demoted, but also less obvious acts like being excluded from meetings, projects, or even certain social events. The final step is to actually report the misconduct. When reporting, be prepared to provide as much detail as possible, and your reasons for believing something unethical or illegal has occurred. Once you report, an investigation will be opened. Keep in mind that once you've witnessed misconduct, you must report it. A failure to report it could result in disciplinary action not only against the person engaged in the behavior, but against you as well. In summary, it is critically important that we are able to identify what misconduct is, understand the avenues available for us to report, as well as the protections available to each of us under the law, and to report the issue as quickly and accurately as possible. 3 simple steps to making the right choice in these situations. In the scenario involving your coworker giving lavish gifts to a customer, it's probably very clear that you must report it. In the short term, it may feel like you risk damaging relationships with coworkers or putting your job on the line. But in the long run, you'll be helping uphold a reputation for integrity and protecting yourself and the company from potentially serious legal and reputational risks. Now, doesn't that make you feel better already? If you have questions about reporting misconduct, please contact our Ethics or Compliance Office. We're here to help. Have you ever had a personal situation that you thought might interfere with your ability to provide the best possible patient care? Maybe you were unsure about whether you should raise the issue at work. It can be very stressful as we struggle with making the best decision. Consider this situation. It has been especially busy at work lately, and you've been coming home tired after nearly every shift. As you finally get to sorting through your stack of mail, you find a notice saying your professional license has been suspended, or worse, that you have been excluded from participating in federal healthcare programs. You believe there is a discrepancy, but the details are still unclear. Do you notify your supervisor of the notice, knowing very well that you won't be permitted to treat patients until this is corrected? Or do you keep this to yourself while you quickly work towards a solution? It can feel like you're stuck between a rock and a hard place. The good news is that by the end of this brief video, you'll have the tools to confidently make the best choice in these situations. You'll make the right choices for both yourself and for the organization, avoid potential disciplinary action, and feel a whole lot better in the process. The first step to working through these situations is to understand that the choices you make as an employee, either personal or professional, have the potential to impact other employees, your patients, and our organization as a whole. You know that a license or certification is part of how you show that you are able to do your job, and that you must keep your license active and in good standing. This is a requirement for all clinical employees. If you do not maintain your professional license in good standing, you put patients and yourself at risk. Apart from state licensing boards who oversee clinician licensure and certification issues, the Department of Health and Human Services has a role in maintaining the quality of federal healthcare programs like Medicare and Medicaid. The department may exclude individual providers or whole organizations where the provider or organization fails to meet strict legal and ethical standards. This applies to nurses, therapists, physicians, and more, and can even result from instances of defaulted health education loans. Because the government does not pay for services performed by an excluded party, our organization does not allow any excluded individuals or contractors to provide services on our behalf. For this reason, our employees and vendors are screened on a regular basis, using a government database to ensure they haven't been otherwise excluded. So, Now that we understand just how much our personal decisions might impact the organization, what's next? Well, it's important that we avoid actions that undermine the care we provide and place us all at risk of, among other things, government exclusion, fines, or even jail time. This means that regardless of our position, we must all be on the lookout for healthcare fraud and kickbacks, patient neglect or abuse, billing for unnecessary patient services, inadequate patient care, misuse of controlled substances, and disciplined, sanctioned, or revoked clinical license or certifications for issues dealing with professional competence. The third and final step is this. If we become aware of any situation that might put our organization or our patients at risk, we must speak up. Whether you're concerned about the pending or current status of your clinical license, or worried that you may not be allowed to participate in federal healthcare programs, you must contact a supervisor or the compliance department. In summary, we must understand that any decision made by an employee, either personal or professional, has the potential to impact the well-being of other employees, our patients, and the organization. We must avoid actions that undermine the care we provide, and we must speak up when we suspect there is a situation that could compromise our integrity or our ability to provide the highest quality care to our patients. Going back to the situation involving your professional license or your potential exclusion, it's pretty clear by now that you must notify a supervisor immediately if you're unable to ensure that your license is in good standing. Failing to do so places patients, our organization, and yourself at great risk. In the short run, it may feel like you're drawing negative attention to yourself at work unnecessarily, but in the long run, you'll have done what is necessary to avoid significant trouble for yourself and for our organization. Now, doesn't that make you feel better already? If you have any questions about licensure, exclusion screening, or other compliance issues, please contact our Ethics or Compliance Office. We're here to help.